These are Alice's adventures in Wonderland, the place of curiosity, intrigue and mystery. This girl is neither greatly strong nor amazingly brave, highly intelligent or radiantly beautiful. She is just Alice. But Alice has something better: imagination.
I wonder what it would be like to be as small as you.
Alice was a normal-sized girl, but to the little ladybird sat on Alice's hand, Alice was a giant.
I wonder where you've come from. I wonder what you'll be doing today when you fly away.
And with that, the little ladybird flew away, leaving Alice guessing, and once again, very bored. She looked across at her sister.
What are you reading? A book. I can see that, but it has no pictures or conversations in it. So what is the use of a book like that?
It's a history book with kings and queens in it.
Just like a pack of cards?
Not quite.
Suddenly, a white rabbit with pink eyes ran close by her.
Oh dear, I shall be late.
The rabbit actually took a watch out of his waistcoat pocket, looked at it before he hurried on. Alice looked at her sister, but with her sister's nose buried in the book, Alice assumed she had seen nothing and started to her feet. It flashed across her mind that she had never before seen a rabbit with either a waistcoat or a watch to take out of it. Burning with curiosity, she ran across the field, just in time to see it pop down a large rabbit hole under a tree.
Where are you, Mr. Rabbit? For what are you late? Maybe I might be able to...
Oh!
Alice had not a moment to think about stopping herself before she found herself falling down the rabbit hole.
Either this is a very deep hole, or I'm falling very slowly. Well, after such a fall as this, I shall think nothing of tumbling down the stairs. How brave they'll all think me at home.
Down, down, down. Would the fall never come to an end?
I wonder how many miles I've fallen. By this time I must be getting somewhere near the centre of the earth. Let me see. That would be 4,000 miles down. I think, yes, that's about the right distance. I wonder if I shall fall right through the earth.
Suddenly, thump! Down she came upon a heap of sticks and dry leaves, and the fall was over. She looked up, and the white rabbit was still in sight, hurrying down the tunnel.
Oh, my ears and whiskers! How late it's getting!
She was close behind it when she turned a corner, but the rabbit was no longer to be seen. She found herself in a long, low hall. She walked sadly down the middle, wondering how she was ever going to get out again, when she came upon a three-legged table, and on it there was nothing but a tiny golden key.
I wonder what this key might belong to. Hello, though. What's this?
At the end of the hall was a little door about 15 inches high. She tried the little key in the lock, and to her great delight it fitted.
Such a small passage, not much larger than a rat hole. But that is the loveliest garden I've ever seen. If only I could get out of this dark hall and wander about among those beds of bright flowers and those cool fountains. Oh, how I wish I could shut up like a telescope.
You see, so many out-of-the-way things had happened lately that Alice had begun to think that very few things were indeed really impossible, and in a good imagination very little is. She went back to the table, half hoping she might find another key on it, or at any rate a book of rules for shutting up people like telescopes, and this time she found a little bottle on it. Around the neck was a paper label with the words "Drink me," beautifully printed in large letters.
I say there, Bottle, it's all very well to say "drink me," but are you marked poison or not? History is full of children who had got burnt and eaten up by wild beasts and other unpleasant things, all because they would not remember the simple rules their friends had taught them, such as that a red-hot poker will burn you if you hold it too long, and that if you cut your finger very deeply with a knife, it usually bleeds, and that if you drink much from a bottle marked poison, it is almost certain to disagree with you sooner or later.
Fortunately for Alice, this bottle was not marked poison, so Alice ventured to taste it, and finding it very nice indeed, she very soon finished it off.
What a curious feeling.
She was starting to shrink.
I must be shutting up like a telescope. I must only be 10 inches high. And that means I'm the right size for going through the little door into that lovely garden.
But alas for poor Alice, when she got to the door, she found she had forgotten the little key which sat upon the table. Try as she might, the legs of the table were too slippery, and the poor little thing sat down and cried.
Come, there's no use in crying like this. I advise myself to leave off this minute. That's better.
Very soon her eye fell on a little glass box that was lying under the table. She opened it and found in it a very small cake on which the words "Eat me" were beautifully marked in currants.
Well, I'll eat it, and if it makes me grow larger, I can reach the key. And if it makes me grow smaller, I can creep under the door. So either way I'll get into the garden, and I don't care which happens. Curiouser and curiouser. Now I'm opening out like the largest telescope that ever was. Goodbye, feet. Oh, my poor little feet. I wonder who will put on your shoes and stockings for you now, dears.
Just then her head struck the roof of the hall. In fact, she was now more than 9 feet high. With no hope of getting through the door now, she sat down and began to cry again.
You ought to be ashamed of yourself to go on crying in this way.
But she couldn't stop shedding gallons of tears until there was a large pool all around her, about 4 inches deep, reaching halfway down the hall. After a time, she heard a little pattering of feet in the distance. It was the White Rabbit returning, splendidly dressed with a pair of white kid gloves in one hand and a handkerchief in the other.
Oh, the Duchess! The Duchess! Oh, won't she be savage if I kept her waiting?
If you please, sir.
Scared, the rabbit dropped his things before running away. Poor Alice.
Please come back. I'm so very tired of being all alone here. And you've dropped your things.
As she said this, she looked down at her hands and was surprised to see she had put on one of the rabbit's white kid gloves while she was talking.
How can I have done that? I must be growing small again. How high am I next to the table? I must be about 2 feet high and shrinking rapidly. Oh no! The little golden key!
Alice reached out, but to no avail. The key was too far away once again, and she was smaller than ever. She was up to her chin in a sea of tears.
I wish I hadn't cried so much. I shall be punished for it now, I suppose, by being drowned in my own tears. That will be a queer thing, to be sure. However, everything is queer today.
Just then she heard something splashing about in the pool a little way off, and she swam nearer to make out what it was. First of all she thought it might be a walrus or a hippopotamus, but then she remembered how small she was now, and she soon made out that it was only a mouse that had slipped in like herself.
Oh, Mouse, do you know the way out of this pool? I'm very tired of swimming about here.
The mouse looked at her rather inquisitively and seemed to wink with one of its little eyes, but said nothing.
Perhaps it doesn't understand English. Où est ma chat? Oh, I beg your pardon. If I hurt your feelings, I quite forgot you didn't like cats.
Not like cats? Would you like cats if you were me?
Well, perhaps not, but don't be angry about it. I wish I could show you our cat Dinah. I think you'd take a fancy to cats if you could only see her. She is such a dear, quiet thing. She sits purring so nicely by the fire, licking her paws and washing her face. She's such a capital one for catching mice. Oh, I beg your pardon. Oh, I'm afraid I've offended it again.
The mouse was swimming away from her as hard as it could and making quite a commotion in the pool as it went. Alice thought the whole thing rather absurd, but the mouse looked so grave that she dare not laugh. She followed the mouse instead, and when she had made it out of the water, she heard the little pattering of footsteps again. It was the White Rabbit.
The Duchess! The Duchess! Oh, my dear paws! Oh, my fur and whiskers! She'll get me executed, as sure as ferrets are ferrets. Where can I have dropped them, I wonder?
Alice followed the rabbit a few steps behind.
Hello? Are you looking for your gloves?
Why, Mary Ann, what are you doing out here? Run home this moment and fetch my gloves and a fan. Quick now!
Quite startled by the rabbit, Alice ran off into the distance to which he had pointed without even trying to explain the mistake he had made.
He mistook me for his housemaid. How silly of him. Well, if he wants his gloves back, I've got to stop wandering about in this wood and return these items. Maybe he will know how to find my way into that lovely garden I saw through the tiny door. I think that will be the best plan.
It sounded an excellent plan. No doubt, and very neat, very simply arranged too. The only difficulty was that she had not the smallest idea of how to set about it. Pondering among the trees, she saw a large mushroom growing near her, about the same height as herself. Alice stretched to peep over the edge of the mushroom, and her eyes were immediately met by those of a large caterpillar that was sitting on top with its arms folded, quietly smoking from a large hookah pipe.
Who are you?
I hardly know, sir, just at present. At least, I know who I was when I got up this morning, but I think I must have been changed several times since then.
What do you mean by that? Explain yourself.
I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir, because I'm not myself, you see?
I don't see.
I'm afraid I can't put it more clearly, for I can't understand it myself to begin with, and being so many different sizes in a day is very confusing.
It isn't.
Well, perhaps you haven't found it so yet, but when you have to turn into a chrysalis, you will some day, you know, and then after that into a butterfly, I think you should feel it a little queer, won't you?
Not a bit.
Well, perhaps your feelings may be different. All I know is it would feel very queer to me.
You? Who are you?
This brought them back to the very beginning of the conversation. Alice felt a little irritated at the caterpillar making such very short remarks. She drew herself up and in a very grave way spoke to him.
I think you ought to tell me who you are first.
Why?
Here was another puzzling question, and as Alice could not think of any good reason, and as the caterpillar seemed in a very unpleasant state of mind, she turned away.
Come back. I've something very important to say.
Please, continue.
Keep your temper.
Is that all?
No.
Alice waited. For some minute it puffed away without speaking, but at last unfolded its arms, took the pipe out of its mouth again and spoke.
So, you think you've changed, do you?
I'm afraid I am, sir. I can't remember things as I used to, and I don't keep the same size for 10 minutes together.
What size do you want to be?
Oh, I'm not particular as to size. Only one doesn't like changing so often, you know.
I don't know. Are you content now?
Well, I should like to be a little larger, sir, if you wouldn't mind. 3 inches is such a wretched height to be.
The caterpillar angrily reared itself up to full height. You see, it was exactly 3 inches high itself.
I think you'll find it's a very good height to be indeed.
But I'm not used to it.
You'll get used to it in time.
The caterpillar took the pipe out of its mouth, yawned once or twice, shook itself, then got down off the mushroom and crawled away into the grass, muttering as it went.
One side will make you grow taller, and the other side will make you grow shorter.
One side of what?
Of the mushroom.
Alice remained thoughtfully looking at the mushroom for a minute, trying to make out which of the two sides was which, as it was perfectly round. She found this a very difficult question. However, at last she stretched out her arms as far as they would go and broke a bit off the edge with each hand.
And now which is which? Let me try this side first.
Alice nibbled a little of the right-hand bit to try the effect. The next minute she felt a violent blow underneath her chin. It had struck her foot. At once she set about work, trying to eat some of the other bit. But her chin was so pressed against the foot, there was hardly any room to open her mouth. She did at last and managed to swallow a morsel of the left-hand bit.
My head's free at last. But where are my shoulders? They are nowhere to be found.
All Alice could see, when she looked down, was an immense length of neck, which seemed to rise like a stalk out of the sea of green leaves that lay far below her.
What can all that green stuff be? And where have my shoulders got to? And oh, my poor hands, how is it I can't see you?
She was moving them about as she spoke, but no result seemed to follow, except a little shaking among the distant green leaves. As there seemed to be no chance of getting her hand up to her head, she tried to get her head down to her hand, and she was delighted to find that her neck would bend about easily in any direction. Alice had just succeeded in curving it down into a graceful zigzag and was going to dive in amongst the leaves when a sharp hiss made her draw back in a hurry. A large pigeon had flown into her face and was beating her violently with its wings.
Serpent!
I'm not a serpent, I tell you. I'm a...
Well, what are you?
I'm a little girl, although today I'm not quite myself.
A likely story indeed. I've seen a good many little girls in my time, but never one with such a neck as that. No, you're a serpent, and there's no use denying it. I suppose you'll be telling me next that you never tasted an egg.
I have, but little girls eat eggs quite as much as serpents do, you know.
I don't believe it. You're looking for eggs. I know that well enough. And what does it matter to me whether you're a little girl or a serpent?
But I'm not looking for eggs. I'm looking for a lovely garden and a white rabbit, as it happens. And if I was looking for eggs, I wouldn't want yours. I don't like them raw.
Alice watched the pigeon flutter away. She took a moment to survey the land on which she looked down and spied a house.
Whoever lives there, it'll never do to come upon them this size. Why, I should frighten them out of their wits.
Alice set to work, carefully nibbling each part of the mushroom until she had succeeded in bringing herself down to an acceptable height, about midway up the front door of the house. For a minute or two she stood looking at the house and wondered what to do next. Suddenly a footman in livery came running out of the wood. Judging by his face, she would have called him a fish, a salmon at that. It rapped loudly at the door Alice was observing.
For the Duchess, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet.
The door opened and out stepped a similarly dressed footman, who appeared to be a frog.
For the Duchess, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet. I said an invitation from the Queen to play croquet. Get it?
Yes, I heard you the first time.
The fish footman looked up and then left with a look of disdain upon its gills. Alice thought at once how easily upset animals here were when the door closed with an unexpected bang. Alice timidly came out from where she had been watching, smiled at the frog, and knocked upon the door.
There's no sort of use in us knocking, and that's for two reasons. First, because I'm on the same side of the door as you. Secondly, because they're making such a noise inside. No one could possibly hear you.
I need to find out where I am.
Geographically or metaphysically?
Now there's a question today.
There might be some sense in you knocking if we had a door between us. For instance, if you were inside, you might knock, and I could let you out, you know?
How am I to get in?
Are you to get in at all? That's the first question, you know?
But what am I to do?
Anything you like?
Oh, there's no use in talking to him.
Wondering what to do, Alice tried the door and found out it was not locked at all. She sighed at the unhelpfulness of the frog, opened the door and went in. The door led right into a large kitchen, which was full of smoke from one end to the other. The Duchess was sitting on a three-legged stool in the middle, nursing a baby, and the cook was leaning over a fire, stirring a large cauldron which seemed to be full of soup.
Achoo! There's certainly too much pepper in that soup. And there's certainly too much of it in the air, wouldn't you agree?
Alice directed the question at the occupants of the kitchen, the regal-looking lady, a cook, and a large cat which was sitting on a hearth grinning from ear to ear.
Please would you tell me why your cat grins like that?
It's the Cheshire Cat, and that's why. Pig!
The Duchess said the last word with such sudden violence that Alice quite jumped, but she saw in another moment that it was addressed to the baby and not to her, so took courage and went on again.
I didn't know that Cheshire Cats always grinned. In fact, I didn't know that cats could grin.
They all can, and most of them do.
I don't know any that do.
You don't know much then, do you? And that's a fact.
Alice did not like the tone of this remark at all, and thought it would be well to introduce some other subject to conversation. While she was trying to fix on one, the cook took the cauldron of soup off the fire, spilling the hot liquid near the baby.
Oh, please mind what you're doing.
If everybody minded their own business, the world would go round a great deal faster than it does.
Which would not be an advantage. Just think of what work it would make with the day and night. You see, the Earth takes 24 hours to turn round on its axis.
Talking of axes, chop off her head.
Alice glanced rather anxiously at the cook to see if she meant to take the hint. But the cook was busy stirring the soup and seemed not to be listening at all, so she went on again. To Alice's horror, the Duchess began singing some sort of lullaby, giving the baby a violent shake at the end of every line.
Speak gruffly to your little boy and beat him when he sneezes. He only does it to annoy because he knows it teases.
What are you doing?
Here, you may nurse it for a bit if you like. I must go and get ready to play croquet with the Queen.
Why are you snorting like a steam engine? Are you ill? If I don't take this child away with me, they're sure to kill it in a day or two. Wouldn't it be murder to leave it behind?
Alice thought aloud at the predicament, and the baby seemed to reply.
Don't grunt. That's not at all a proper way of expressing yourself.
The baby grunted again, and Alice looked very anxiously into its face to see what was the matter with it. Alice did not like the look of the thing at all.
No wonder the Duchess called you a pig with a grunt like that. But if you are actually a pig, then you have a serious error in your spelling, for you are no pig, but a pug.
This time there could be no mistake about it. It was neither more nor less than a pig with a spelling error, and she felt that it would be quite absurd for her to carry it any further. So she set the little creature down and felt quite relieved to see it scamper away quietly into the wood. She was only a little startled by seeing the Cheshire Cat sitting on the bough of a tree a few yards off. The cat grinned when it saw Alice. It looked good-natured enough, she thought. Still, it had very long claws and a great many teeth, so she felt that it ought to be treated with respect.
Cheshire Puss, would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?
That depends a good deal on where you want to get to.
I don't much care where.
Then it doesn't matter which way you go.
So long as I get somewhere.
You're sure to do that, if you only walk long enough.
What sort of people live about here?
In that direction lives a hatter, and in that direction lives a March hare. Visit either you like. They're both mad.
But I don't want to go among mad people. Everyone has problems, but...
Oh, we're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad.
How do you know I'm mad?
You must be, or you wouldn't have come here.
And how do you know that you're mad?
To begin with, a dog's not mad. You grant that.
I suppose so.
Well then, you see, a dog growls when it's angry, and wags its tail when it's pleased. Now I growl when I'm pleased, and wag my tail when I'm angry. Therefore I'm mad.
I call it purring, not growling.
Call it what you like. Do you play croquet with the Queen today?
I should like it very much, but I haven't been invited yet.
You'll see me there, and it is such a lovely rose garden.
The rose garden? With a little door at one end?
I do believe so, but only on a Thursday.
And with that, the cat vanished. Alice was not much surprised at this, as she was getting used to the queer things that were happening. While she was looking at the place where it had been, it suddenly appeared again.
By the by, what became of the baby? I'd nearly forgotten to ask.
It turned into a pig with a spelling error.
Oh, I thought it would.
Alice waited a little, half expecting to see it again, but it did not appear, and after a minute or two she walked on, only to look up and to see the cat was there again, sitting on the branch of a tree.
Did you say pug or rug?
I said pug, and I wish you wouldn't keep appearing and vanishing so suddenly. You make one quite giddy.
All right. Then cheerio.
The cat vanished quite slowly, beginning with the end of his tail and ending with a grin, which remained for some time after the rest had gone.
Well, I've often seen a cat without a grin, but a grin without a cat. It's the most curious thing I ever saw in my life.
Alice left the house of the Duchess and Cheshire Cat behind. She still had to return the rabbit's gloves and handkerchief to him, but she decided at last this was quite a fun afternoon and should enjoy herself. Soon enough she came upon another house, and there was a table sat outside. Alice deduced that this must be the March Hare and the Hatter who were having tea, but with a dormant dormouse sitting between them, fast asleep.
Good afternoon.
No room. No room.
There's plenty of room.
Oh, well, have some wine then.
I don't see any wine.
There isn't any.
Then it wasn't very civil of you to offer it.
It wasn't very civil of you to sit down without being invited.
I didn't know it was your table. It's laid out for a great many more than 3.
Your hair wants cutting.
You should not make personal remarks. It's very rude.
So, tell me, why is a raven like a writing desk?
That's better. We shall have some fun now. I believe I can guess that.
Do you mean that you think you can find out the answer to it?
Exactly so.
Then you should say what you mean.
I do. At least I mean what I say. That's the same thing, you know.
Not the same thing a bit. You might just as well say that I see what I eat is the same thing as I eat what I see.
Yes. You might as well say that I like what I get is the same thing as I get what I like.
You might just as well say that I talk when I sleep. It's the same thing as I sleep when I talk.
It is the same thing with you. Tell me what day of the month my pocket watch says it is.
Your watch should tell you it's the 4th.
2 days wrong. See? I told you hair butter wouldn't suit the works.
It was the best butter, though.
Yes, but some crumbs must have got in as well. You shouldn't have put it in with the bread knife.
What a funny watch. It tells the day of the month and doesn't tell what o'clock it is.
Why should it? Does your watch tell you what year it is?
Of course not, but that's because it stays the same year for such a long time.
Which is just the case with mine.
I don't quite understand you.
The dormouse is asleep again.
Oh, of course, just when I was going to remark myself.
Have you guessed the riddle yet?
No, I give it up. What's the answer?
I haven't the slightest idea.
Nor I.
Well, a raven isn't at all like a writing desk. That's just nonsense. I think you might do something better with the time than waste it asking riddles that have no answers.
If you knew time as well as I do, you wouldn't talk about wasting it. It's him.
I don't know what you mean.
Of course you don't. I dare say you never even spoke to time.
Perhaps not, but I know I have to beat time when I learn music.
Ah, that accounts for it. He won't stand beating. Now, if you only kept on good terms with him, he'd do almost anything you liked with the clock. For instance, suppose it were 9 o'clock in the morning, just time to begin lessons. You'd only have to whisper a hint to time, and round goes the clock in a twinkling. 1:30, time for dinner.
I only wish it was.
That would be grand. But then I shouldn't be hungry for it, you know?
Not at first, perhaps. But you could keep it to 1:30 as long as you liked.
Is that the way you manage?
Not I. We quarrelled last March, just before the hare here went mad, you know. It was at the great concert given by the Queen of Hearts, and I had to sing Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, how I wonder what you're at. You know the song, perhaps?
I've heard something like it.
It goes on, you know. Up above the world you fly, like a tea tray in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle.
Oh, twinkle, 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 winkle, twinkle, twinkle.
Quiet! He's getting to the good bit.
Well, I'd hardly finished the first verse when the Queen jumped up and bawled, "He's murdering the time! Off with his head!"
How dreadfully savage!
And ever since that, he won't do a thing I ask. It's always 6 o'clock now.
Oh, is that the reason so many tea things are put out here?
That's it. It's always tea time. And we've no time to wash the things between whiles.
Then you keep moving round, I suppose.
Exactly so. As the things get used up.
But what happens when you come to the beginning again?
Suppose we change the subject? I'm getting tired of this. I vote the young lady tells us a story.
I'm afraid I don't know one.
Then the Dormouse shall. Wake up, Dormouse.
I wasn't asleep. I heard every word you fellows were saying.
Tell us a story.
Yes, please do.
And be quick about it, or you'll be asleep again before it's done.
Once upon a time, there were 3 little sisters, and their names were Elsie, Lacey, and Tilly. And they lived at the bottom of a well.
What did they live on?
They lived on treacle.
They couldn't have done that, you know. They'd have been ill.
So they were very ill.
But why did they live at the bottom of a well?
It was a treacle well.
There's no such thing.
And so these 3 little sisters, they were learning to draw, you know.
What did they draw?
Treacle.
But I don't understand. Where did they draw the treacle from?
You can draw water out of a water well. So, I should think you could draw a treacle out of a treacle well. Eh? Stupid?
But they were in the well.
Of course they were. Well in. They were learning to draw, and they drew all manner of things. Everything that begins with an M.
Why with an M?
Why not?
Oh.
Wake up. You've a story to tell.
Yes. That begins with an M, such as mousetraps, and the moon, and memory, and muchness. You know you say things are much of a muchness. Did you ever see such a thing as a drawing of a muchness?
Really, now you ask me, I don't think...
Then you shouldn't talk.
How rude! This is the stupidest tea party I was ever at in all my life. Quite silly.
Alice left them to it and wandered among the trees looking for the cat, the only creature thus far for which she had any regard. All she had wanted to do was return the things to the White Rabbit and take a peek into the wonderful garden she had seen. Fortunately for Alice, she did not have to venture far, as just behind a wall she heard voices.
Look out now, Five! Don't go splashing paint over me like that!
Venturing through an arched metal side gate set into the wall, she found herself at last in the beautiful garden, among the bright flower beds and the cool fountains. A large rose tree stood near the main entrance of the garden. The roses growing on it were white, but there were 3 gardeners busily painting them red.
You're doing it again!
I couldn't help it. Seven jogged my elbow.
That's right, Five. Always lay the blame on others.
You'd better not talk. I heard the Queen say only yesterday that you deserve to be beheaded.
What for?
That's none of your business, too.
Yes, it is his business, and I'll tell him. It was for bringing the cooked tulip roots instead of onions.
Well, of all the unjust things. Oh, come on.
How peculiar. Painted playing cards. Painting, not playing. This is a very curious thing. Would you tell me, though, why you were painting those roses?
Why, the fact is, you see, miss, this here ought to have been a red rose tree, and we put a white one in by mistake. And if the Queen was to find it out, we should all have our heads cut off, you know. So, you see, miss, we're doing our best before she comes to... Oh, the Queen! The Queen!
First came 10 soldiers carrying clubs. These were all shaped like the gardeners, oblong and flat with the hands and feet at the corners. Next, 10 courtiers. These were ornamented, all with diamonds, and walked in 2 by 2. Next came the guests, the Duchess, and among them the White Rabbit. He was talking in a hurried, nervous manner, smiling at everything that was said, and went by without even noticing her. Then followed the Knave of Hearts, carrying the king's crown on a crimson velvet cushion, and last in this grand procession came the King and Queen of Hearts.
Who is this?
Idiot! What's your name, child?
My name is Alice, so please your majesty.
And who are these?
How should I know?
Well, you should. Off with the head! Off with the head!
Consider, my dear, she is only a child.
Get up! What have you been doing here?
May it please your majesty, we were trying to spruce things up a little.
So I can see. Off with their heads!
Oh, miss!
You shan't be beheaded.
Alice walked up to the playing card soldier.
You are very good at what you do, I'm sure, but the Queen is playing a trick on you as a test.
What do you mean?
Well, you see this oval on top of my shoulders? That's my head. But what do you have above your shoulders?
Hey?
I'll give you a clue. Not much.
I don't follow.
You don't have anything. You're headless, just like these 3.
Alice winked and tapped her nose as a sign to keep a secret. The soldier looked back puzzled for a moment and then winked himself.
Are their heads off?
Their heads are gone, if it pleases your majesty.
That's right. You, girl, can you play croquet?
Yes, I can, your majesty.
Come on, then.
Alice smiled to herself. She was in the garden, walking with the rabbit she had chased down the rabbit hole.
It's a very fine day. Rather hot, in fact.
Very. Here, take this fan, and maybe these gloves, too.
Oh, my stars! Where did you find them?
Oh, that's a very long story. Where's the Duchess?
Hush, hush! She's under sentence of execution.
What for?
She boxed the Queen's ears. You see, she came rather late, and the Queen was displeased. She's very easy to upset.
Indeed, most people here are.
Get your places!
Alice had arrived with the others at the croquet ground, and quite the peculiar one it was at that. It was all ridges and furrows. The balls were live hedgehogs, the mallets live flamingos, and the soldiers had to double themselves up and stand on their hands and feet to make the arches. Alice soon came to the conclusion that it was a very difficult game indeed.
You can't do that! Off with his head!
They're dreadfully fond of beheading people here. It's a great wonder that there's anyone left alive.
It is, isn't it? How are you getting on?
I don't think they play at all fairly, and they all quarrel so dreadfully one can't hear oneself speak. And they don't seem to have any rules in particular. At least, if there are, nobody attends to them. And you've no idea how confusing it is, all the things being alive. For instance, there's an arch I've got to go through next, walking about at the other end of the ground. And I should have croquetted the Queen's hedgehog just now, only it ran away when it saw mine coming.
How'd you like the Queen?
Not at all. She's so extremely likely to win that it's hardly worthwhile finishing the game.
Who are you talking to?
It's a friend of mine, a Cheshire cat.
I don't like the look of it at all. However, it may kiss my hand if it likes.
I'd rather not.
Don't be impertinent, and don't look at me like that.
A cat may look at a queen. I've read that in some book, but I don't remember where.
Well, it must be removed. I wish you'd had this cat removed. Off with his head!
You'd better go, or you might just get it in the neck.
Oh, I doubt that. Your turn.
Alice left and played her shot, but when she got back to the Cheshire Cat, she was surprised to find quite a large crowd collected round it, with the king and executioner gazing at its bodiless, grinning face floating in mid-air.
Go on, then.
Well, I can't cut off its head. unless there is a body from which to cut it.
I'm the king, and I say anything that has a head can be beheaded. So don't talk nonsense.
How about I have the pair of you executed and let you think of something?
There. It seems to have obliged, Your Majesty.
Well, quite. Come, let the trial commence.
There was quite a kerfuffle, and everyone made their way from the garden to the courtroom. The Queen of Hearts was seated on a throne when Alice arrived. The knave was standing before them in chains, with a soldier each side to guard him. The King and White Rabbit were standing in front of the Queen. Alice had never been in a court of justice before, but she had read everything about them in books. She was quite pleased to find that she knew the name of everything in there. She could see from the wigs the King was to be barrister for the prosecution, and the Queen was to be judge.
Herald, read the accusation.
The Queen of Hearts, she made some tarts, all on a summer's day. The Knave of Hearts, he stole those tarts, and took them quite away.
Excellent. Consider your verdict, jury, please.
Not yet, not yet. There's a great deal to come before that.
If it please your majesty, call the first witness.
Call the first witness. I present to you the Hatter and, guests.
I beg pardon, your majesty, for bringing my biscuits in, but I hadn't quite finished my tea when I was sent for.
Well, you ought to have finished. When did you begin?
14th of March, I think it was.
15th.
Write that down, jury. And you, take off your hat.
It isn't mine.
Stolen. Write that down also, jury.
I keep them to sell. I've none of my own, you see. I'm a hatter. Clue is in the name.
Give your evidence, or you will be executed, whether you're nervous or not.
I'm a poor man, your majesty. I hadn't begun my tea, not above a week or so, and what with the bread and butter getting so thin, and the twinkling of the tea...
The twinkling of the what?
It began with the tea.
Well, of course twinkling begins with a T. Do you take me for a dunce? Go on.
I'm a poor man. Oh, and most things twinkled after that. Only the March Hare said...
I didn't.
You did?
I deny it.
He denies it. Leave out that part, jury.
After that, I cut some more bread and butter. I can't remember much more.
You must remember, or I'll have you executed.
I'm a poor man, your majesty.
You're a very poor speaker, but if that's all you know about it, you may stand down.
I can't go no lower. I'm on the floor as it is.
Then you may sit down.
I'd rather finish my tea.
Oh, just go, and just take his head off outside.
The Hatter was out of sight before the executioner could get to the door.
Never mind. Call the next witness.
Call the next witness.
Alice watched the White Rabbit as he fumbled over his list, feeling very curious to see what the next witness would be like. Imagine her surprise when the White Rabbit read out the name.
Alice.
Oh, my!
What do you know about this business?
Nothing at all, Your Majesty.
Nothing whatever?
Nothing whatever.
That's very important, jury.
If I may, unimportant, Your Majesty means, of course.
Unimportant, of course, I meant. Yes, you know. Important, unimportant, unimportant, important.
Jury, consider your verdict.
There's more evidence to come yet. Please, Your Majesty. This paper has just been picked up.
What's in it?
I haven't opened it yet, but it seems to be a letter written by the prisoner to somebody.
It must have been written to someone, unless it was written to nobody, which isn't usual, you know. Who is it directed to?
It isn't directed at all, in fact. There's nothing written on the outside. It isn't a letter, after all. It's a set of verses.
Are they in the prisoner's handwriting?
No, they're not. And that's the queerest thing about it.
He must have imitated somebody else's hand.
Please, Your Majesty, I didn't write it, and they can't prove I did. There's no name signed at the end.
If you didn't sign it, then that only makes the matter worse. You must have meant some mischief, or else you'd have signed your name like an honest man.
That proves his guilt.
Objection! It proves nothing of the sort. Why, you read the note.
Objection noted. Pass it here. Don't let him know she liked them best, for this must ever be a secret kept from all the rest, between yourself and me. That's the most important piece of evidence we've heard yet.
Indeed, so now let the jury...
Can you explain the meaning of the letter? I don't believe there is an atom of meaning in it.
If there's no meaning in it, then that saves a world of trouble, as we needn't try to find any. And yet I don't know. I seem to see some meaning in them after all. It says, I could not swim. You can't swim, can you, knave?
We're playing cards. None of us can swim.
All right, so far. We know it to be true. That's the jury, of course. I gave her 1, they gave him 2. Why, that must be what he did with the tarts,
Let me see. But it goes on to say they all returned from him to you.
Why, there they are. Case closed. Nothing can be clearer than that, my dear, I think. You can now instruct the jury to consider their verdict. Finally.
No! Sentence first, verdict afterwards.
Stuff and nonsense. The idea of having the sentence first.
Hold your tongue.
I won't. I've just about had enough of your temper. No one has stolen your tarts. They are right there, and there is no case to answer.
I am the Queen and judge of these proceedings. I sentence you to be executed for contempt of court. Off with her head!
The Queen exploded like a volcano. Cards shuffled themselves into the courtroom, surrounding Alice.
Who cares for you? You're nothing but a pack of cards.
The whole pack rose up into the air and came flying down upon her. She gave a little scream, half of fright, half of anger, as she tried to swat them away.
This way, Alice.
In the flurry, the cat showed Alice the exit, and she beat her way to the courtroom door and out into the garden. But the pack followed her. Outside in the garden, Alice looked around for which way to turn and saw the White Rabbit beckoning her towards the tiny door leading to the hall where she had first arrived.
Over here, Alice.
Alice started to run, but a tower of cards arose in front of her, but this was quickly demolished by 3 rolling hedgehogs battered by the painted playing cards she had met earlier. She quickly ran to the door, but once more she found she was too tall.
Quickly, Alice, she's coming.
Alice looked, and indeed the Queen and Executioner, flanked by more playing cards, were marching towards her. The Cheshire Cat appeared.
Don't you have something for that?
Oh, the mushroom.
Alice ate the shrinking mushroom and scurried underneath the locked door. Back in the hall, she found a crumb of eat-me cake on the floor. At her present size, it was quite large, so she ate as much as she could.
I think I've had quite enough adventures for one day.
And with that, Alice started to grow and grow upwards and outwards of the hole. But alas, growing is a lot slower than falling, and by the time she had reached the top, Alice had fallen fast asleep.
Wake up, Alice, dear. Why, what a long sleep you've had.
Oh, I've had such a curious dream.
And she told her sister, as well as she could remember them, all of Alice's adventures in Wonderland, just as you've heard them here today.